on the oh, sorry, somebody said something hilarious in the Discord over there. I just had, oh my goodness, I hit live. I've been tacked silly, and we've been live for a couple of seconds. Anyway, hey internet. I'm very together, of course, as typical, in typical Reese fashion. I'm very well organized. I'm very laid out. Nothing has been left to chance for today's show. And I brought on the top talent, the very top talent we have available for these sorts of interview shows, Mr. Dan Sakharov. How's it going, Dan?
Hello, how you doing? I'm glad to be here. And let me just state right off the bat that this is why I love your show. You know, you just roll with it, and that's the best part of these streams. So don't feel put out.
Well, Sprited has come over from our from the Mattriarchy Discord to say hello.
Hello.
You've been doing some awesome fan art lately. Sprited has that's just knocking out of the park. Not of my stuff, but of other people's stuff. It's really good. His Cowboy Bebop was did a really great Mike Spiegel. Okay, before we get talking on today's topic, I have to point out it came in the mail today. My copy of Soul Finder.
Oh, nice.
Stoked, yes. So I haven't read it yet because I walked in the door from my work, and my wife's like, "Oh, something from Antarctic, Texas, something, I don't know." And I'm like, "Ah!" I've been anxiously looking for that for weeks. So, but yeah, or more than weeks. No, just weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I wasn't expecting it. I've been expecting it for weeks.
Well, it's really
for months. Yeah.
It's really interesting to get these crowdfunded books in a timely manner. It almost goes against the laws of nature to get them so soon, doesn't it?
Well, I can't talk too much about. I still haven't gotten onto it yet. But our book is going to be delayed until probably March.
Yeah, I say that self-deprecatingly because the Mythoverse books are also going to be delayed. We were just informed of a printer problem that that has forced us to seek out alternate sources to print the book out. So I say that with all due humility that I myself will also be late. But you know what? At the very least, we managed to deliver the book digitally in a timely fashion. So there at least is that in our favor.
And I have read them, actually. I quite enjoyed them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We put a lot of work into it. And it.
I think my favorite's probably the Changeling story, just because Brett captured so much genuine teen pathos.
Yeah, I think that is definitely going to be the strength of that book. Mm-hmm. The gorgeous visuals are also a plus, but I think he did a good job capturing the feeling of being a teenager with all that uncertainty and all of that bleak, what am I in this world kind of thing. And from what I've seen of the second issue, that will be ramped up exponentially. So if you enjoyed that aspect of issue 1, you will very much like issue 2.
Well, and the thing I liked that I thought was great about it specifically, and I should maybe have Brett on to talk about it sometime, but it wasn't just that it was depressing. I mean, because the story wasn't depressing, right? There was dealt with all these realistic aspects and all of that kind of stuff, but not in a way that was a chore to go through.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean,
for me, it was one of those things where it was yeah, I remember being that sad. You know?
Yes.
I remember those days. That was stupid. You know?
Yeah, and Brett and I had a lot of conversations. Being a parent of children, one of which is roughly that age, a little bit older, and one who is a bit younger. He picked my brain a lot as to what can be expected at that period in a child's development, and I offered whatever assistance I could. And he has a lot of his own experiences to draw upon, being raised by a preacher, by a pastor. So Maeve herself is, of course, raised in a Christian household, and she experiences a crisis of faith when she realizes, spoiler alert, that she is in fact a changeling. And there's a lot more that will be explored in issue 2. So I don't want to go into any more detail, but it is going to be something special. If you enjoyed Changeling issue 1, Brett's really ramping up the feels for issue 2. So
yeah, no, I think that's actually, I think it's a great story. The idea about this crisis of faith because you find you're not human.
Yeah, I think the best.
That's such an interesting little take on it.
Yeah, I think my favorite line in the book is, "Why would God let this happen to one of His children?" And the next line is, "But you're not one of His children." And it's like, wow, ouch.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So
and
hats off to Brett for that writing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well done. And one of the things there is more about that I want to get into that relates to the Adobe Kroger thing, but that's not what we came to talk about tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we came to talk about, if memory serves, Star Wars and myths.
Yes, and it was one of those things where we were going to do this back in October, and you had some life happen to you.
Yeah, a lot of life happened to me, but you know what? I think it's roughly under control now. So
yeah, well,
I have a lot to talk about with this topic in general, being the age that I am. So I am very, very pleased to come on and speak with you about it tonight.
And so, ironically, and this is the thing, we did not plan. We weren't sitting here thinking, okay, let's do a topical show the week before Star Wars open. In fact, earlier this month, when we decided on today to do it, I didn't realize that was Star Wars opening week.
You know what? I completely blanked on that too. And that's one thing I would like to talk about tonight is just how drastically Disney has let this property, this beloved, like generation-defining property, just collapse into irrelevancy so quick within a span of 5 years. I mean, I guess you could say The Mandalorian is beginning to revive it. I have not yet had a chance to watch The Mandalorian yet. I'm waiting for the whole season to be out so I can just go through it. But I do intend to watch it, and I've heard nothing but amazing things about The Mandalorian. But yeah, so we did not plan to talk about this on release week of Rise of Skywalker, but I forgot it was coming out. I really and so for someone my age and for someone with my background, that is an astonishing statement. Yeah. That I was unaware that it was even coming out. Like, were it not for the various YouTubers I was subscribed to discussing the controversies around it and or the leaks, I would have forgotten it was even in production, let alone being released.
Well, and like somebody was talking, I watched the video. I can't remember who put it together. It may have been the Clownfish couple.
Oh, I love them.
They're adorable, right?
Yeah. But aside from just those adorable anime figures, it's just the way they introduce themselves. She's like, "Hello," and her little thing comes up. It's very cute.
And the thing is you could tell when they get going at each other that there's just a genuineness to their interaction. It's as an old married dude, I find it charming. I love it.
It's very real. It's very authentic.
Very much. Anyway, I think it may have been one of their videos talking about it that I was just like, oh, so it's out in Europe. They're talking about the previews and it's opening here.
It's like, oh yeah, it is, isn't it? Okay.
So when we get going on it, let's go ahead and just jump in. Dan, why don't we talk about your Star Wars journey? What got you into the series, what you liked about it, and we'll kind of go from there.
Sure, no problem. Well, full disclosure, I am a late generation Xer, so I was born in the 70s. I was too young to have seen the first film in the theaters, but my older brother did. However, some of my earliest memories, although I did not see Star Wars 1 in the theater, or if I did, I was too young to remember it. My earliest memories involve playing with a Darth Vader TIE fighter in the rain. Okay, so I took it out in the rain, and I faced the cockpit upwards, so the little glass cockpit was facing upwards, and I had my little action figure. I can't remember which one it was, probably a Darth Vader, in it, and he was sheltering from the rain inside the TIE fighter, and the raindrops were bouncing off the plastic. I distinctly remember the sound of the raindrops pitter-pattering off this TIE fighter, and I ruined the stickers on the foils, but I remember playing with these toys, and I just remember loving them. And I remember my brother telling me this is from Star Wars, and that he saw it and I didn't. Ha ha ha! He was making fun of me because he saw something cool and I didn't.
Okay.
And I love the action figures. And my brother and I played with them all the time. And when Empire Strikes Back was released, I had not yet seen the first Star Wars. Okay, the first film I saw was Empire Strikes Back in the theater, and my grandmother took me to see it 5 times in the theater. Okay, and this is when I was 5 years old. So that film was much more nuanced than the first film. So having started in that one, all I remember was that, hey, I like the tauntauns. I like that things that guy was riding on. I like the giant machines with 4 legs. I kind of like the Millennium Falcon. But obviously that film was, slightly more, I guess you could say, intricate on a storytelling level than the first one was. But I still saw it 5 times. I loved the visuals. I loved Han Solo. I wanted to be Han Solo and all that. And I saw the first film later on video, shortly before Return of the Jedi came out. I went to a private school and they had Star Wars parties. And so we would watch Star Wars and we'd all be sitting in the room together, and we'd be, all the older kids would be telling us what was happening. Like, you see that TIE fighter there? That's Darth Vader in that TIE fighter because it's got the bent wings. It's a special TIE fighter and all that. So, and I absolutely love it. I remember thinking to myself, I hope that Obi-Wan Kenobi beats this bad guy, because I wanted him to win. He was the good guy. And when he died, I was like, whoa, that's weird. I thought he was the good guy. Why is he dead? I didn't understand quite how this story worked at that time. I was still very young. And I saw Return of the Jedi opening night with my mother. And I had never had so much fun in the theater in my entire life. I absolutely was on the edge of my seat and trembling with fear when Luke was fighting the Rancor. I still remember trembling, like, oh my God, he's going to die. He's going to die. Like, this giant monster is going to eat him. So much tension and so well shot that scene was. And I was flipping out of my seat when Luke got his lightsaber back and just took on the whole sail barge by himself.
Oh yeah.
And when I was younger, I never felt such exhilaration and such like, I want to be this person. I want to be this guy that saves all of his friends. And he's essentially like a little superhero with his lightsaber, He's not like unstoppable, but because he gets shot in the hand and all of that, and he gets injured, but he still manages to rescue everybody and get them off the sail barge. And then he goes, and gets trained up one last time. And the rebels assault the Death Star for the second time. And how exciting that was. Oh my God, what an exhilarating scene that was, seeing them all go into the superstructure, the start of the Death Star, and fighting the fleet and getting trapped, and everything's going wrong. And Luke is getting tortured by the Emperor. And I'm like right there with him saying, no, stop, Luke, you can fight him, stop. And then when Vader picks up the Emperor and throws him down, the entire theater erupted into such cheers. I have never experienced anything before or since. Like, that moment when the Emperor was falling to his death, it was like the Super Bowl. Like, everyone was going, yeah. And it was just a different energy then, It was, I don't think I've ever experienced that, even with all the Marvel movies, like the grand climax of Endgame. I never saw such energy in the crowds as I did during that moment in Return of the Jedi. So it's safe to say by the time Return of the Jedi had been released, I was still in my single digits. So it was very much in my formative years. So not only did the films shape a lot of my early play, a lot of my early imagination, the toys did too. A lot of the toys were very, very difficult to find. Like Leia in the Bausch disguise was a very difficult figure to track down. So my friends who had that figure, we all wanted to like, can I see that figure? Can I see that? And obviously they wouldn't let us play with it because, you know, they didn't want us to ruin it. But when one of my friends brought in Gamorrean Guard, you know, and I finally got to hold the Gamorrean Guard, I was like beside myself. Like, how cool is this, you know? And it wasn't just the films, it was the imagination that it sparked within me and all my friends. We could sit and play Star Wars with or without the figures. Like, we invented whole scenarios based around these films.
Well, and one thing to point out, somebody, the sprite in the chat talks about his thing. I'll go and share it on the screen. Absolutely the same. From literally before I can remember, Star Wars was huge to me, but these new movies come out so quickly, and so not good or bad, kind of mediocre, that I just accidentally tuned them out.
Yeah, and you know what
one
that
thing
is?
about that I want to point out, though, is growing up in the 80s, like I didn't get into Star Wars until later, right?
Mm-hmm.
But up in the 80s, and I'm probably similar age to you, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be 42 in the spring, so call that for what it is.
Yeah, I'm not that far off.
Yeah. So growing up surrounded by, I mean, you couldn't get away from Star Wars, even though like I wasn't aware of it. I was aware of it. I wasn't familiar with it, but I didn't even know who Luke Skywalker was, and I knew Darth Vader was his father, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was like one of those things where it was ubiquitous, and they had the Ewoks cartoon, and they had the and they had all that kind of stuff, that media presence stuff. It was everywhere. You couldn't get away from it. And
it's
so
true.
And there was the Ewoks movies and all this stuff. I mean, there was Star Wars stuff of various quality throughout that time. In fact, it was weird that in the 90s there was sort of a dearth of stuff because there had been so much stuff in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
About the time of probably Howard the Duck until it was probably Howard the Duck, and then up until, because I would think that was sort of the end of the Lucas powerhouse up until the episode 1. And that was weird how like all of this stuff had been really big, and then it wasn't, and then it was again. And that was one of the things that like the prequels and the special editions, building up the buzz for the episode 1, that was a huge ramp up because there had been this weird pause where like Star Wars was everything, and then it wasn't anymore, and then it was again.
But very quickly to that point, I don't know if you ever read the comic strip Bloom County in the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Okay. Do you remember when he did a parody of Return of the Jedi?
I do not.
Okay. Well, basically he was one of the main characters, Binkley, the slightly sensitive redheaded boy, was dreaming that he was in Return of the Jedi and that he was Luke Skywalker. And within the dream, he says, okay, is that it? It's the end of the flick? Is it a wrap? And George Lucas comes on and says, oh no, we have 3 more films or whatever the line was lined up, but we'll get to them by 1999 or so. And Binkley said, 1999? Oh yes. So he cuts off George Lucas's head with a lightsaber and says, Jedi Knights don't wait 15 years for a sequel. And I'll never forget that was the exact year that episode 1 was released. So I'm not even making this up. Look it up. It's eerie. It's freaking eerie. But Berkeley Breatha just randomly spits out a year, and that happens to be the year that episode 1 is released. And this was back in 1984.
So, yeah, wow. Jedi Knights did not wait 15 years. I'm gonna have to look that up. I think I actually sort of kind of remember it, but like I hadn't put any significance to it. I sort of half remember that gag. You know what I mean? Right.
But
here's probably why it didn't stick to me. I hadn't seen any of the pictures.
Yeah.
So I may have. I was at the time I was living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, reading the funnies. I probably just read past it like, well, that was weird.
Yeah, I mean, I had the collection, and I was able to keep it with me for years, and I was able to refer back to it. It's like, oh my god, he actually predicted this in '84. How fucked up.
Yeah,
But
for sure. It's crazy.
yeah, and another point, you mentioned the enormous ramp up to episode 1. I don't think any of the younger people who weren't alive at the time or are too young to remember or appreciate it could really understand. They had countdowns in newspapers, 40 days until episode 1.
Well, and even before that, I mean, okay, so like my first exposure to Star Wars, let me back up here because this is chronologically, was 1995. I didn't see Star Wars until I was in college. Okay. And I lived down the hall from a guy who was a giant Star Wars fan. I mean, like intense. Had read the expanded universe stuff, had bought a bunch of the comics. I mean, he was hardcore Star Wars. And I was like, well, what are you doing? He's like, watching Star Wars. And I'm like, what's it about? Well, I'm like, stop talking to me.
Sounds like a true Star Wars fan.
I was like, my God, man. Well, anyway, I don't know if it was the mystery of it or whatever it was, but I became engaged. I was like, wanted to know more about it. I found myself fascinated with it. So I conned him into letting me borrow his VHS tapes. By borrow, it was start and stay in his room while he changed tapes for it.
Yeah. Again, people don't appreciate that you couldn't just get stuff whenever you wanted to back then.
Yeah.
You needed to have a physical copy of the movie.
Yep. And so I sat through and I watched it and I was like, this is awesome. And it's got all these big themes and these ideas of legacy and that transition from adolescence and the thwarting of hopes and dreams and the real world crashing in and all the kind of stuff that I thought makes it really great. And I was really about it. And then it was just a few months later, so spring of '96. I'm sorry, it would have been the spring of '97. They released the first special edition of episode 4, right? And we were all in the theater, and half of us were wearing costumes, and it was this huge thing to see it on the big screen for the first time since I think the second run of A New Hope was something like 82, because Lucas had really kept the lid on all that. So even the tape had been, it wasn't tape, the film had been decirculated, and so that was the thing. And so it was a huge event. And then, it was, so the lead up to episode 1 wasn't just all the stuff to lead up to episode 1. It was also the re-release of the movies in the theaters and new marketing on all the special edition stuff and all of this kind of stuff to go in there. It was enormous, right? And then between, what was it, 97 was I think it would have been the summer of 98 was when the special edition for the Return of the Jedi was out, and then it was like just 9 months or something before episode 1 came out, and that 9 months was nothing but Star Wars.
Nothing. I heard it on the radio. I read it in the newspapers. I saw it on TV. There was, like I said, a newspaper which would count down like 30, 29, 28 days, 27 days. And you see a little picture of Jake Lloyd as Anakin, looking down at the dirt. 26, 25. It was insane how much hype there was for this movie.
So I live in a little town in West Nebraska. It's no secret there. But our little theater, I had a couple of my friends who got a tent for tickets.
And I can absolutely understand and empathize and sympathize with them because I myself was so stoked for a new Star Wars film because there hadn't been one. There hadn't been a new Star Wars film since 1983 or 84, whenever Jedi came out. So this was a massive event. This was a new cultural touchstone that we were going to be able to add to the Star Wars canon. And, we had no way of knowing what was actually going to happen, but just the mere fact that I saw actors wielding lightsabers, and oh my God, these droids look like the new stormtroopers, and there's new space battles, and just the mere. And when I saw Ewan McGregor do the Force push, I was losing my mind. Like, that's a new force power on screen. That's incredible.
Yep.
Like, we're seeing what the Jedi can do, because as competently filmed and executed as those old films were, they were limited by their technology. And now in 1999, we had all this new special visual effects potential. And now that was being applied to Star Wars. And I was like, wow, we're going to see what these Jedi can actually do when they bust out, because they can actually execute it on screen now. Yep. And that was just the superficial thing. I was just thrilled to hear the John Williams theme again and to revisit this world that was so much a part of my formative years.
And so I want to get back to the original trilogy in a second, but what were your reactions after seeing episode 1?
It was complicated. I could not have been more thrilled for the lightsaber duel. I will admit that I was losing my SHIT, so to speak, over. I could not believe, like, the lightsaber duels were fun. Like the lightsaber duel in Jedi, where Luke loses his mind and charges at Vader at the end, and that haunting choir starts up. That always stuck with me. But the action was always very, as limited as they were by the technology of the time. But seeing the Jedi flipping all over the place and Darth Maul taking on both Jedi and doing all those martial arts maneuvers and fighting with a double-bladed lightsaber, it was a whole new paradigm in lightsaber battles. And the execution was flawless and all that. I loved that so much. Like I said, I would go back to the theater, pay full price just to watch Duel of the Fates again. The rest of it, I wasn't quite so sure about. I had to stop and think about it because it was not like the other films at all. It was a huge departure. Like the other films were very simple and straightforward adventure films. This is the bad guy. This is the good guy. Here are your 3 characters. They all have very recognizable arcs. They're very likable. They're charismatic. And the villains are very interesting. And this film was like, okay, we had the 2 Jedi, but they really were just kind of there, and they did cool force power stuff, but they weren't anywhere like a Han Solo character. They didn't have any like really cool, like quirky traits that you could point to and say, this is this character. As much as I enjoyed seeing them bust out, it was like there wasn't much there for me to glom onto. And obviously Jar Jar was a little bit grating, but you know what? I was willing to overlook that because I was just kind of in awe of the fact that there was a fully digital character on screen for the first time, integrating with actors as though he was another actor. That was very impressive. Like I will be the first to say, like, that was a marvelous achievement, technologically speaking.
Yeah.
I just didn't quite understand why the plot just didn't seem to be nearly as interesting as the other films. Now the shortcomings of the film have been discussed to death by other YouTubers, whatever. So I'm not going to go into those. I'm telling you what I thought.
Right. Part of the reason I bring it up is that we in my little circle of friends, we had a very similar reaction. And first of all, the minute we left the theater, everybody was jazzed. Just this emotional experience and seeing it all again. And, yeah, there's cheese, but who cares? There's always cheese. There's always cheese. It's Star Wars. It's pop. It's pop sci. It's whatever. But then, over the course of days, it started to settle on people. People are like, Jake Lloyd can't act. Talk about angels. What was with the midichlorian thing? And oh my goodness, pod racing. Why? And, I
didn't quite understand why it had to be so complicated. Like, why did he have to orchestrate this ridiculously complicated bet with Watto? Yeah. Why? Obviously, we needed to get Anakin with the Jedi. Okay, fine, I get that, but they could have done it differently. Yeah, it's like George Lucas has great ideas, okay, but he admits this, and anyone who watches films written and directed by him will admit that his ideas are much better executed by other directors and or script writers that have a better sense of structure and pacing and all that. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, but one of the things is to come back to that though is my some of my other friends, they were like, wait, this was terrible, right? I mean, I'm not wrong. After all this, it's terrible. What if it's always been terrible? What if I just was a kid and I didn't realize that it was terrible because I was a child and I've just had the nostalgia glasses on my whole life, and I was.
And that's a very fair point to make. But going back and rewatching, like I recently got I was fortunate enough to catch a retweet of someone linking to despecialized versions of the films. So I will admit that I downloaded all 3 of those and I've watched them. Hey, look, I've spent so much money on Star Wars throughout the course of my life. I don't feel guilty about this.
Yeah. I just, when I was in that position, I always sat there. I said, look, guys, I didn't start watching Star Wars till 3 or 4 years ago. I'm telling you, as an adult, having seen it for the first time as an adult, it was good.
Yes, the first Star Wars film holds up. Even the despecialized edition without the remastered special effects, it still holds up. And there's a reason why it holds up. I mean, why has Star Wars persevered over 3 generations and is warranted like a $4.05 billion purchase from Disney? Why hasn't like Disney's other space feature, the Black Hole? Why wasn't that rebooted? Why was Star Wars the one that they purchased? Why was it? I mean,
there are several reasons for that. Dan.
There are several, and I'm leading into that point. Why has Battlestar Galactica not caught on? Like, it was released around the same time, kind of as an response. Yeah. So why was that not as much of a cultural milestone as Star Wars was? It's obviously not just because of the laser swords or the space battles or the spaceships or all the other sci-fi stuff that we see in these other films that no one remembers. Like The Last Starfighter, cool concept, but that's not been rebooted yet, and no one really even talks about that. Why Star Wars? Why is that persevered for so long? Why is that the big thing that everyone always remembers fondly? And this all comes back to it is because of the fact that the first Star Wars film was an archetypal story with archetypal characters. It was essentially a perfect example of art as universal connectivity to our cultural values. The other properties I mentioned were not. The reason why Star Wars has such universal appeal is because every one of those characters is an archetypal character. Luke is an archetypal character. Darth Vader is the Dark Father. The Rogue, the Princess, the Wise Wizard. We all understand these characters. We all understand their arcs and their journeys. They're very relatable. They resonate with a very simple and profound truth to this day. And this is why we can go back and watch this film even without the updated visuals, and it's still fun to watch, and we can still connect with it.
I think part of it is that the biblical mythology aspect of it. But I think the other thing of it is that it also is not foreign to the American paradigm, right? The individualist paradigm. And I think you have those 2 things in Congress. If you look at like Battlestar Galactica, it's a fun movie, but it's very much a movie about groups of people that are exemplified by a few main characters. But these main characters are stand-ins for large groups of people, and so it's more of a story about a collective survival than just about an individual valor.
Right.
In Star Wars is very much about an individual valor becoming the thing that saves a larger group of people.
Right. And Luke's journey. I'm going to very briefly segue. I'm not going to get off of the old trilogy. I'm just going to make a very brief comparison. Well, although The Force Awakens was roughly a soft reboot of A New Hope, why was Luke's journey more satisfying than Rey's? I mean, I've asked myself this question, and I think there's a very simple reason. because Luke had a hero's journey and Rey did not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Rey honestly should not have been the lead of The Force Awakens. It should have been Finn. Finn had the hero's journey. Finn was the person we meet initially. He gets like sort of a shocking moment of reality where he gets a call to action to flee the First Order.
Mm-hmm.
That it should have been he who, maybe he got his ass kicked by Kylo, but he should have been the one who we followed through the films. When Rey suddenly grabbed that lightsaber at the end, it did not feel earned. It did not feel like she went through a satisfying enough arc to suddenly become the hero. Like she was more like have you ever seen Dread 2012?
No.
Okay. Well, in that film, it's called Dread. And Carl Urban does star as Dread, but he is not the lead. The lead is his partner, the rookie who follows him throughout this day.
Okay.
She has the arc. Dread is just this thing that kind of a force of nature that moves the plot along, but all the growth occurs in his partner.
I think that could be a real valid way to do a story too. I mean, I think really
it absolutely is. You're right, and that's
Captain America is basically that guy too.
Right, precisely, and that's what I felt Rey was. That's what I was coming to. Was Rey kind of helped the story along, but Finn had the arc. Like Finn was the one who grew and changed, and he was the one who it would have been much more satisfying to have him be the lead because of the way he was written.
Well, and I think that honestly, I don't wonder whether or not that's what was being set up in that movie. To go on a little bit, because we obviously know that where Johnson took it was not where Abrams left it. You know?
Oh God, no. Ryan was essentially trolling us.
Yeah, for sure. And not to get too far into the weeds on that one, but it really feels like that may have been the direction they were going with it. But the also thing is like the Rey's story doesn't really fit the European mythic archetypes.
It really doesn't. She's not. Her story has no artistic foundation. Her story has what would be better described as a modern topical sociological foundation, where it's like she did not have the standard hero's journey that Luke went through.
Well, and even if you look at a sorry, Twitless in the chat says Finn is my favorite character in Adventure Time. So, but what I was saying is that one of the standard fairy tale archetypes in the European sphere is the idea of the heroine's journey, where the heroine's job is not to save the day but to return order, and to bring a sort of tranquility to things. That's what you see in Snow White. That's what you see in Cinderella. These princess characters. It's the same way in Hansel and Gretel too, frankly. But where Hansel's saving Greta, but Greta is preserving Hansel. And that's but with that, it's a situation where the real establishment of the home, the reestablishment of security, is the the Snow Queen is a perfect example of a European's heroine's journey.
Yeah, in the first.
I'm not gonna say Disney botched.
Oh, what haven't they botched? I mean, they basically they got a lot right when they were first mining like the legends of Western civilization to build up their animation brand, but lately they haven't done a very good job because that's a whole other topic. But like Princess Leia in the first film does exemplify that very well. She doesn't blow up the Death Star, but she does organize the efforts to get everyone together to the point where order could be restored.
Exactly.
It's Luke who goes out there and blows up the Death Star, but he could not have done it without Leia's efforts, and she could not have done it without Luke's efforts.
Yeah. And Leia is a great example of the archetypical warrior queen too.
Yes, and that's
where she's not taking crap from anyone, but her position is not in the battlefield. It is in
right, and nor should it. She's a force multiplier. She's not a warrior. Like she's the one who says, "Hey, here are the plans. Here's the weak spot." Now you guys go blow it up.
Yeah, sorry, Twitless is cracking me up here. He also says Ray fits into exactly one beige outfit.
That's another thing. I mean, the richness of the visuals in the original trilogy cannot be denied. Like Luke starts out, he's a young blonde farm boy in white.
Yep.
Okay. In the second film, he gets mauled by a wampa within the first few minutes of the film, and he goes on a journey to learn about the Force, and he's in a gray jumpsuit. So he's maturing, he's changing. He gets his hand lopped off, and he learns Vader's his father. He has the worst day of his life. And the next time we see him, he's in a black tunic. So he's going through a metamorphosis as he comes into his own. Rey, it's only fitting that she wears the same clothes every time we see her, because she never grows or changes. Like, I can't even tell you what her arc is in the first film or the second one, because there really isn't one.
Well, yeah, I mean, the second one is an aberration, because Johnson was intentionally trying to make a movie that you couldn't expect, you couldn't see coming. No one would imagine that a Star Wars movie would be paced exactly like a Wes Anderson film. No one would see that coming.
Yeah, and there's a time and a place for those things, sure.
I love Wes Anderson films.
I love them too, but this is
don't
not
want
that.
to watch. You go to Star Wars to watch Star Wars. You go to Bombs to watch Wes Anderson, or
Yeah, I love all that stuff, but like you said, we expect certain films to be certain ways, and if you essentially go out to the whole point of that film is to say you're expecting this, well, psych, that's not what's happening. That's not entertaining, and that's not going to stand the test of time. Like, we're not going to be talking about The Last Jedi except to as an example of what not to do in 40 years, like we're talking about A New Hope, or Empire, or Jedi.
Yeah. And I do think that's an important aspect. And it's one of those things where because you have something that was more universally appealing, and I want to talk about that with the thing. The Last Jedi seemed to be more of an experiment in name recognition and branding than it did in telling a mythic story. And the thing I find impactful about mythic stories is not just that they are these formulas that we have through mythology, right? It's not that formulas exist. It's that the formulas exist because they are reflections of our experiences, right? They are metaphors by which we understand the lives that we live. And even though we come from different places and we experience life in different things about it, there are just these commonalities, and those commonalities are reflected through mythology. And so when we abandon those types, then we really aren't being honest to the lives that we are reflecting.
That's very well put. Like, art has always been, like you said, it's a reflection of nature. It's a reflection of those aspects of our lives that transcend the petty day-to-day things, like love, loss, death, longing, or hope, or all those things. And those are all perfectly reflected in well-told mythic stories, like Star Wars Episode 1. You see loss, you see death, you see longing, you see hope, and all of that. And what we have now today, art has stopped being a reflection of what is good, beautiful, and true, and it's become like agitprop stuff. Like, it's no longer about showing truth; it's about power. Well,
and that comes into the whole postmodernist concept of art, where art's a reflection of the self instead of a reflection of the ideal.
Yes, like, it's no longer showing universal truths and values. It's calculated.
It's because of is there? Because the question is there universal truth? Well, no, there's not. There's just my truth. That's the presumption. Is I'm telling my truth, and your truth is stupid, man.
There is no my truth or your truth. There is only the truth. That's what I have to say about that. Like, I don't get to define what truth is.
Yeah, and I'm not saying any of us have figured it out. I do happen to think some people are closer than others, but I do believe it's out there, and I think it's the job of human beings to keep looking for it, and keep figuring it out, and keep making our art have these conversations.
Absolutely. Now, I myself come from a very philosophical background. If you've at all read my webcomic Molly Beans, you know it's a big thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like you were saying, art, like what actually is it? Like why is it so meaningful and why is it so important? It's because art is philosophy that everyone can understand. Like if you try to explain, Aristotle to, the average person, they're not going to be moved by Aristotle. He's very dry. He's very like, this is what logic is. This is what rhetoric and poetics are and all that. But if you tell them a story with a moral, they're much more likely to process the lesson and be moved by it to the point where they will actually take action on it. And that is what good art, one of the things that good art does, is it allows people to understand philosophy. It allows them to be moved by philosophy. And all these universals that you were just saying, these universal truths and the big T truth and all of that, like the correlation between a concept and reality, that is truth. And art can show us this. And by just making something up, it's essentially a lie that shows us the truth, and that's not really.
The thing is, it's not so much that it's a lie, and I think I think Neil Gaiman I'm gonna massacre the quote, but he said in Midsummer Night's Dream, which is a comic based on the play, right? In that issue of Sandman, Neil Gaiman was in the voice of Titania, the fairy queen comes to Shakespeare, and she says, "This play you've done is great, but it never happened." Right?
Mm-hmm.
And Shakespeare says, "Just because didn't happen doesn't mean it's not true." And I think that's one of the most profound things. Neil Gaiman is an excellent writer, but I think one of the most profound things he's ever written is that sentence: that just because something never happened doesn't mean it's not true. And I think that's part of it. When we talk about these fictions that we craft or that we partake in, that they still have to have not just the ring of truth, but actually reflect those underlying truths of our experiences, and not in the personal sense, but in the transcendent sense.
Right. There is something more to us. That's something that's transcendent and universal, and that is what all good art should show us. Yeah. And like, for example, I'm just going to pull a random quote out of Star Wars. I think Empire, like the first film, A New Hope, was by far the most archetypal story. Like that had all the Hero with a Thousand Faces, all that stuff. And that's why that film is so accessible, because it reflects everything that we know to be true in our cultural's master narrative. But in Empire, there was some really profound, like, philosophical statements, and it all had to do with Luke's Jedi training. And I think the one that's always stuck with me was when Yoda said, "Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter," and he taps Luke on the shoulder. And that is, to me, that's always been referring to consciousness, the ability to compare a proposition or a concept to a universal standard like free will, that kind of stuff. And that is and our ability to understand archetypes and to appreciate, the truths reflected to us in art is what makes us fundamentally, more than animal. And that's what that always meant to me.
Well, and I think one of the things about that that's most fascinating is that level of abstraction, right? That at our basic level, we tell stories about, cats and mittens to explain the importance of personal responsibility. We tell stories about, gingerbread men and foxes to understand, the dangers of dealing with untrustworthy humans, right?
Exactly.
So when it comes to that, I think that we have this intrinsic abstract thinking that's part of our lives. And, I work in mental health, so I deal with people that have, various, and with teenagers and people that have different levels of concrete versus abstract thinking as part of their normal process. But everybody understands stories, right? just there's something so ingrained in us that that we understand what we learn through stories more than we understand what we understand that we understand. You know what I mean?
I couldn't have said it better. And as a parent, and I'm sure you agree with me on this one, if you want to teach your kids a lesson, don't recite philosophy to them. Tell them a story that has a moral.
Yeah.
You know, you put them to bed every night with a story that has a moral. They will internalize those values and those lessons a lot more than if you tried lecturing at them and saying,
Well, I agree 100% on that. Well, before we move on, I want to go ahead and address some stuff in the chat that I think is got some really interesting stuff going on there, and I want to go ahead and talk about it. One, Matt C said that the new movie has an 88% audience score, and he senses a tremor in the force. I gotta say, I never trust opening weekend for that stuff. I just don't. You got to give it a couple weeks, because a lot of times people, I know when I saw Titanic in the theater, I was blown away, and then I gave it a month, and I realized it was so. And
yeah, I mean it's opening.
Easy to get caught up into the emotion of a thing, and forget that man falling off the deck and hitting the screw is the funniest thing you've seen in a movie in 20 years.
It really was. It was right out of Three Stooges.
Especially with the sound.
Clong. But anyway, yeah, it's opening. It's opening weekend. It's the last film in the quote unquote Skywalker. I never knew it was called the Skywalker saga, but until
they had to call it something because they want to make other Star Wars properties.
Oh yeah, they need to make this be a category on Disney Plus. That's the whole thing.
So, that's the thing. So it's marketing. It's marketing. The message says that Disney is a Theosis ship that isn't really the same entity as it was back when it's built up its animation dominance. True. It is now a brand, not just the works of a particular thing. Matt C also says the less of an arc, a story that Rey has, the more we are respecting her. That's how it's done.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like her character has no artistic value. It's
my thing is we don't need to respect her. She's a fictional character. She's there to serve a purpose, and that purpose is to entertain and inform the audience about truth.
That's absolutely so.
I'm a little hoity-toity about that stuff. So
it's okay. I am too. I believe that the whole purpose of art is to make truths stick in our minds.
Yeah, I agree. Twitler's also, who is cracking me up here. He says, this is one serious thing. How much classical mythology can one expect from a mega corporation that has long abandoned integrity for the sake of profit?
Well, they're not trying to create art. They're trying to create propaganda. The whole point of all these films is let's not make profound truths appear on screen. Let's just make sure we have enough people of different skin tones and different sexual orientations as we can.
And I think a lot of it isn't even necessarily about profit. I think they're okay not making a profit as long as they make enough like press market to make it on the back end. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, a lot of movies are just made to be losses, just to get a political message across. But sometimes they're made to be losses just so you remember, that Brad Pitt was in something.
Yeah, and if they lose a lot of money on The Last Jedi, for example, what's important is that you go away from that thinking, hey, you know what? They're right. Legends are problematic. Let's not romanticize legends. Let's
make fairness. Yeah, they didn't lose money on The Last Jedi. They lost money on Solo.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like if they had lost money on The Last Jedi, they would be like, it was worth it because we tore down the mythology of Luke Skywalker. Because legends are a problem.
Honestly, at that point, they also, they don't have to give Fox any bit. They have before they bought.
Yeah,
that's the whole thing. The Metal points out that Eastern archetypes have lots of good character arcs, but the Monkey King Rey is not.
Yeah, I mean it's not just Western civilization that has archetypes, but the ones that resonate most with us are those because we're in the West.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I honestly think there's more crossover than people realize too, because I think there's just universal truths too. Still.
You don't have to be in the West or the East to appreciate loss or love or longing or or hope. Though all human beings feel that.
Matt C mentioned that he was trying to watch Avengers Endgame but got bored and tuned in instead. So I appreciate that. Also, I have mentioned it before. Go check out the Needle Movers channel. You can hear me talking to PS Melter for an hour and a half about how much I hate Endgame. Hate Endgame. It's horrible. And see here. Matt C also. Wait, no, that's not the one I meant to point out. The Metal says that don't blame the actors for half the sequels. They had 2 directors in charge. I think that's fair.
I never blame the actors. They're just doing what they're told.
Well, sometimes they're what they're, anyway.
Well, there are cases where, an actor's input can change a scene. See Empire, where Han Solo says, me too, instead of I love you too. I'm sorry. No. He does not say me too. He says, I know.
I know. Or in Indiana Jones, where he shoots the guy. That was ad-libbed because he was
Oh yeah, actors definitely are creative, and they can add input to a scene. For the most part, though, especially in these big committee movies, they're just there to get a paycheck, and they do what they're told.
Matt C also says, I watched Avatar, the Blue People one, at a midnight showing. I called my wife delirious with fatigue and told her I just seen the best movie in history.
I was laughing out loud at how terrible the dialogue in that movie was.
Oh, I just couldn't even get past it. It just was like, okay, so are we watching The Last of the Mohicans, or are we watching Fern Gully, or are we watching The Last Cry, or are we...
one thing I can say for James Cameron. They fly now.
They fly now.
Oh yeah, they fly now. We've never seen jetpacks in this widely expansive science fiction universe.
I always meant the dragon things, but okay, go back to Star Wars.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You know what? It was very strange. I think Avatar was the first film I was actively rooting for the antagonists.
Yeah.
I wanted the blue people to get blown away. I was so come on.
Well, and it's just like the thing about Avatar, not to derail things too much. So thank you, Matt. But the thing, not to derail things too much, but the thing about that I couldn't get over is that his entire purpose in coming was to find a peaceful resolution to their conflict. He didn't even try. He's just like, their females are hot.
Yeah. I think there was in the Hishi about that. It was like, wait a minute, you didn't tell them what we needed? It's like, no, I must have forgotten to do that. Damn it.
And James Cameron makes pretty pictures. Actually, we've mentioned 2 James Cameron pictures that were as good as everyone said.
Yeah. Well, one thing James Cameron can do is cater to the lowest common denominator. He's definitely good at that.
Well, and I gotta say, he didn't direct it, but producing Alita, I loved that picture.
Yeah, I was a huge fan of the anime, so I really wish that movie had done better.
Yeah, it was I really liked it. So, okay, but back to Star Wars.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
We actually are coming up on 8. I have not seen Jeremy, who's supposed to come on, and I want to change topics when he gets here. Are you going to stick around, or do you have to take off?
I can stick around for a little bit, as long as my 1-year-old doesn't wake up. If he does, I'll have to bolt. But I can stay until then.
Okay, well, excellent. Well, we'll keep going with Star Wars until Jeremy gets here. Then,
sure.
What about are the themes of the original Star Wars? Now, of course, you saw them as a child, right?
Sure. So themes went over my head when I was a child, so I had to revisit the films later on. But here's the thing. I think even as a child, the archetypal story resonated with me because it was archetypal. And here's something that I always go back to. Those old films, and up until recently, maybe in the last 20 years or so, the characters were someone that we wanted to be. Now, everyone wants the characters to be them. Like, I wanted to be Luke, even though I knew, I didn't have his background. I was not a Jedi. I was just inspired by his courage and his optimism and his loyalty. And you know what? You didn't have to be a blonde white man to identify with Luke. You didn't need to be a white man to identify with Han. I mean, people of all genders and colors love those three characters because they were so archetypal. And nowadays, it's like we want to see ourselves on the screen rather than aspire to be the people on the screen.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah.
Well, and one question I have is then why is it that when people are doing shows like this, a lot of times they don't use their actual faces?
Well, my face would add no value to this conversation.
Well, I was going to say, you threw me off, Jeremy. Jeremy, thanks for coming.
Hey, Jeremy. Yeah, that's the reason I don't really
gather myself together here. The thing about the wanting to see ourselves on the screen. Oh my goodness, Twitless. He says, I always wanted to be Superman, so I wrecked my car and got paralyzed from the waist down.
Too soon.
That's dark.
So mean.
That's dark. Okay, but my thing I was going to say though is I think that I don't think it's the audience that necessarily is making the demand to see themselves on the screen. I think it is the political forces that are in the production crew that assume that the audience is that shallow and foist that upon the screen.
Yeah,
I think it's one thing. It's like I think that you have the idea of representation, and like it's like I'm American Welsh, right? So the first time I saw a movie featuring Welsh people, the Englishman that went up a hill and came down a mountain, I was fascinated with it. I wanted it to, even though it has a very cumbersome title, I thought it was great. And I thought, seeing this picture into this land, the land of my fathers, made by people from over there, and telling a story and dealing with these ethnic themes, I just thought was really cool. But I didn't dislike, Untouchables because there weren't any Welshmen in it. You know what I mean?
I absolutely understand.
So I think it's one thing to say, oh, it's cool to have my people and my to see them represented on the screen. That's neat. But I didn't go to see Nebraska just because it was about people from Nebraska. I heard that the story was compelling and it was a father-son drama, and I love father-son drama.
It was a great movie.
It was.
Yeah.
It did a good job pointing out the not great parts about my state.
Yeah.
One thing I always go back to on this topic is when I went to see Goonies with my friends, I wanted to be Data. Like, I did not want to be Mouth or Mikey. I wanted to be Data because he had all the cool gadgets and he was the most interesting character for me. And I was definitely not Asian. So I didn't care what the guy looked like. I just cared about how the character was written and what he did on screen. Like, I thought he was awesome. So there's definitely value, like you said, in seeing yourself represented. But
and that's actually one point. Matt Krotz in the chat says, "I identify with Lando. Tell me that I cannot."
You can. You can identify as anyone.
Although,
I will have my own floating city. Thank you.
What? I'm sorry.
He's like, I will have my own floating city. Thank you.
I wanted a cloud city too. Holy cow! I wanted those awesome capes, and I wanted above all the what was his name? Lobot, the guy who he could activate with his wrist computer. I wanted one of those.
So, Whitless said, I used to live in Gordon, Nebraska, where I have been many times, and we had a festival because the willow tree existed. And that's actually true. As a nearly local, I can attest to this truth. I'm about 2 hours from Gordon.
So there's a willow tree, and a willow tree is there.
Yeah, it was like when the city was. If I remember the story right, when the city was founded, they planted a willow tree in this first park, And so they have the Willow Tree Festival to commemorate the planting of this particular tree somewhere near the founding of the town back in like the 1870s or something.
Okay.
You're wrong about the details though, because it's been a long time since I reviewed that fact. So Twitless can correct me if he wants from the chat. So, but I haven't been to Gordon in 8 years, probably 9, maybe. It's been a while. It's outside of my normal stomping grounds. I usually go south from Scotts Bluff, so I haven't been up for a long time. Although I did go up to Shadron last weekend because my sister-in-law graduated college, and she was at Shadron State. And so I went up there for the graduation ceremony, and I hadn't been up there in a while. But they have a new comic shop that opened up there that one of our guests from last week, Dan Connor, had just been at to do a book signing. And he's from Denver, so he drove by my town on his way home during our interview. So that was fun. The internet, it's a crazy place out here, I tell you what.
Things are connected in weird ways.
Yeah, they really are. They really, and the thing is like, because of the cellular network, which is a whole separate thing, but because of it, you actually have a network connected to a network connected to another network. So you could be anywhere and still be, have the benefits of, sitting in your living room or whatever. So it's crazy. It's wild. Yep. So, but anyway, Jeremy,
yeah,
we're going to stop talking about Star Wars.
Okay. That's too bad because I wrote a piece about it. It was in the American Spectator today.
Can I just say one more thing about Star Wars?
Oh, sure. Of course, Dan. Of course.
Sure, no problem. This is quick, but this is something that I noticed when I was younger, and at that time I thought it was pretty cool. When Obi-Wan fights Darth Vader in the first film, you have light and dark battling each other with lightsabers. So who's going to win? Obviously, it looks like Darth Vader wins, but ultimately Obi-Wan wins. So, because if you strike him down, he'll be more powerful than he can ever imagine. Because truth will always persist beyond death. And if darkness battles light with light, light will always ultimately win.
Yeah.
So there you go. That was it.
That's not something that I had thought of before. That's cool. Oh, also one thing I wanted to point out from the chat that I had missed earlier. Matt Kratz there had said, he's quoting Yoda, "Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter." But why not both?
Technically, yes, we are crude matter, but I think what Yoda is trying to say is we are more than the crude matter. So,
well, yeah. I know, and that, like the philosophy of Lucas in the Force stuff is not entirely, his metaphysics is not entirely non-suspect. But I don't want to pick that apart too much tonight.
Yeah, and that's fine. I mean,
that whole do or do not, there is no try thing is.
Yeah, I never bought that because I always say nothing beats a failure but a try.
That's just silliness. It sounds good until you're like,
If you think about it for a second, it's like, wait a minute. That don't make a lick of sense.
But yeah. But anyway, so Jeremy, you saying you wrote a piece for the American Spectator today?
Yeah, it was just a piece saying why I'm not going to go see the new Star Wars movie.
Oh, okay.
Just laid out. I'm not feeling it. Thanks. And yeah. I laid out my reasons, and I didn't call for a boycott or anything, but I said, I think other people might share my reasons. I don't know.
No.
Yeah, just like they basically the sequels have been a train wreck, and there's just no point in adding to that train wreck. I mean, I guess you could. I guess if you went drunk and just really enjoyed. I'm sure that might be fun. I've done that a few times, but probably won't be doing that very often in the future.
Yeah. For me, it's just a matter of and this is kind of a bigger issue for me. I just don't care. It's not that I hope fails. It's just my interest is just shot. That I was so disappointed with The Last Jedi. I just really was. I think like I can't think of a single part of that movie that I thought was, in retrospect, worth the trouble. Right?
Yeah. I would say I hope it fails just because The Mandalorian is doing so well, and that will then send a very clear message to the mouse that this is the direction you should go in.
And people are really digging on that. I have not had a chance to, or taken a chance to watch.
Look, it's not a perfect show. It's a good show, and there are some episodes that are just tops. You actually care about what happens to these characters. And they don't really get hung up with representation, which is nice. I have like a weird position. I think representation matters, but it's not the only thing that matters, right?
No.
It's nice if there's someone that looks like me, but that doesn't have to be the case. But it's not. I believe in. I don't like diversity. I think diversity is this political concept that pits us against each other. But I like variety. Variety is the spice of life. And
I think when it comes down to, I think some of that has to do with casting, because like sometimes casting matters and sometimes casting doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, sure.
Like you look at Aquaman, right?
Yeah,
Aquaman is built like the comic book character is built on these Northern European, British Isles concepts of aquatic lore, right? Mm-hmm. There are a lot of mythic elements that were put in there. The King Arthur stuff, the maritime legends of Norway and Ireland and England and all that kind of stuff that formed the fabric of Aquaman's thing. His name, Arthur Curry.
Yeah, Arthur.
Yeah, Arthur. And, Curry is an Irish name.
His name is Arthur and he's a king. Huh.
Yeah. And so they play with it, right? And it was fun. But when they came to make the movie, they're looking for somebody with star power, looking for somebody who's known for being good looking, known for somebody who's got the right mix of severity and impishness, and they picked Jason Momoa, who is actually half Irish.
Yes, holy cow, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. And he's from like middle of he's like from Iowa or something. I mean, he's half Hawaiian, half Irish, and Aquaman is supposed to be half Irish, half Atlantean. So I was like, that's fun.
Works.
It works. It works.
I got to say, when they finally showed him in like the orange thing, that I was like, that's gonna look so bad, and he actually pulled it off.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, that's badass.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yes. I was just like, as a lifetime Aquaman fan, I was on cloud nine that entire movie. But except
I was pleasantly surprised by that movie too.
The Pitbull soundtrack choice was a mistake. But with it, I mean, he had the right amount of star power, the right amount of flair, and the right amount of screen presence to pull off the character really, really well. And the fact he didn't quite look, that he has a different racial type than how, Mort Weisinger drew him in the 40s. And not Weisinger didn't draw, Weisinger wrote, Norris drew. Blech.
Got it.
Brain fart for a second. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything for the story as a whole, right? So I'm not. I don't dislike the casting at all. But with that, it was one of those things where, in some ways, so like in that case, I don't think it hurt the picture. But in a situation where you're shoving somebody in where it does matter, right? Like, especially somebody like Superman, who is iconically Superman and has looked like Superman and has been on film dozens of times and portrayed in that same way. And his last name's Kent. He's not, he should look like a Kent.
Yeah.
Very Anglo-Saxon, and I think is a good fit for that. That's part of my take on it. So I guess that's part of it. But yeah.
Okay. Dan, are you sticking around, or are you going to be taking off pretty soon?
I'm probably going to have to take off. My 1-year-old just woke up, so. Got
it. I have one quick question for you.
Absolutely.
Since we're talking movies.
Sure.
Who should play Adobe in the movie?
There's so many possibilities. Like I would absolutely love if I could time travel to have young Ali Sheedy player.
Okay.
That would be fantastic. Let me see. I probably would have to go for an unknown. But let me just really quickly. I'm blanking on her name.
Okay.
But what is her name? Christian Ritter might work.
Okay. I think I know that person.
Yeah, she played Jessica Jones.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Ever since I saw her in Breaking Bad, I've been like, oh my god, that's Adobe right there. But I do know for a fact that for the antagonist Marsh, I would love to have the adjudicator from John Wick 3. She's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
That'd be a good one.
Yes. One thing before you go, Twitless in the chat said episode 3 taught me that mastering the Force is best exemplified by senior citizens throwing chairs at each other.
I mean, you know how long I've been waiting to see a full-on drag-out Force battle between Palpatine and Yoda, and that's what we got.
Oh,
oh god, they should have been throwing cities at each other, you know.
Oh,
but they should have been like. Did you ever see real quick? Did you ever see Hardcore Henry?
I don't. No, I haven't. I've not even heard of it.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind. I won't derail any further. But yeah, go check out Hardcore Henry when you have a chance. The climax of that scene with a slightly bigger budget would have been a great way to have them battle each other. But anyway, thank you guys. I've got to head out. I really appreciate you having me on. What did I miss?
Matt C said in the chat, for a year I thought Dan Sakura was a lady. Why the cool Sashi art?
Oh, the cool Sashi art. Well, this is actually a character from my webcomic Molly Beans, and I was on Twitter primarily as that account, which was Molly_Beans, and I was promoting the webcomic that way. And back when Sashi was had done the avatar for Nurkish, a few other users had commissioned, similarly styled avatars, and I think I was 7th or 8th in line. I said, I want the Nurkosis plague. The Nurkosis plague, yeah. So I think I hopped on right when it was really starting to pick up. So like shortly after I did, there were like maybe a 12 or so more that managed to get on board. And I couldn't be happier because I want to see her get a lot of commissions. She's amazing.
Yeah, her stuff's great. So
she does really good stuff.
I am in queue, hopefully, to get a waifu pillow of Adobe from her next year. Yeah.
That is, I have to say, that seems like something that Adobe would injure you over.
She probably would, but she can go F herself. I mean, she sold me her life story for one beer, and she can just suck it.
That's odd in the context of this pillow, man. I'm just going to say.
Well, no. I mean, we'll see. She might not have time to get to it. She said maybe by the end of the year, but if not, then I'll just be patient to when she is available.
Yep. So
thank you guys very much, and I had a great time. I hope to do this again sometime.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. When you guys get looking at doing more promo for the next round of Mythoverse stuff, I'd love to have you guys on to talk it over.
Absolutely.
And I might pick at you in between times too if I think of a topic that is particularly appropriate. So.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully I'll be a bit more reachable. It's just been a very busy couple of weeks. Apologize for not getting back to you on the Twitter, but you got me on the Discord, so
that's fine. Jeremy can attest that I was very last minute this week. Oh my goodness.
That's fine. I think it worked out great. So.
Indeed.
All right, guys. Talk to you guys later.
See you then.
Bye.
Have a great one, man. We'll catch you around.
All right, bye.
So, Jeremy.
Yo.
Clean break from Star Wars, apparently. And actually, I will tell you. I want to tell you the story of the chat. I'm sorry if you've heard this once before. You'll just have to deal. But we didn't plan Star Wars for the opening weekend. Dan and I have been trying to make this happen since October, and this is just the week it worked.
Okay.
And so I was like, I didn't even realize Star Wars was opening until Tuesday.
So what you're saying is that the Force was with you?
Apparently.
Yeah, that's.
We'll see if I get.
You know, I'm gonna just be peppering you with these dad jokes. That's just just how it goes.
You're a dad, so that makes
I know.
sense. Yeah.
Like it's now legit.
Yeah. Like how many months in are you? I forget.
She's 5 months old.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's such a fun age.
Yeah. You see they're more of a person every day.
Oh yeah. And you get that moment. I don't know. Maybe I not everybody gets to notice it, but I noticed with my oldest, and not my youngest. But with my oldest, I was there the moment he realized that I was a different being than him.
Okay.
Right. When you could, and he was reaching for me, and realized that like his hand and my face were different things, and
Okay.
not that like I belonged to a different person than he was, and so he touched my nose, and then he touched his nose, and it was, you could actually just see this dawning of realization on his eye, in his mind, that there was this separation, and that that, you know, where he ended and where I started.
Okay. Yeah. I think she's
insane.
I think she's got there. I didn't really see a moment.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those time and place things, but yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating when they start interacting with you, and we start being able to understand, and they get so much so quickly, and it's so crazy to just the incremental, like how much they learn, how fast they learn it. When you down to think that, you know, when they're born, they have almost no context for anything. I mean, there's things that they've obviously learned in utero, but they don't know what those things are, right? Knowing what you know is a thing. Then to see them just like blossom with all of this stuff, and you know, that's everything goes in the mouth. It's just amazing.
No, they're damn quick studies.
Oh man.
So.
Yeah. Mine are 18 and 16 now, so it's been a really long time since I had them that little, but
yeah. Oh well, yeah.
Yeah, I love being a dad. It's
yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
There's some trade-offs that I don't like, but whatever.
Well, and one of the things too is you're in the thick of it with the little one, you know.
Yeah.
Because there's like no independence. So when they start washing themselves and, you know, taking care of, that's a whole different kind of parenting at that point.
Exactly. So I mean, I remember I was pretty self-sufficient as a kid. Like, well, also sort of. I mean, I don't know. I remember that whenever my parents got mad, they'd send me to my room. And are you there, or are you?
I just.
Okay, you roboted on me.
I can hear you.
Okay, all right, good. And so anyways, they'd send me to my room, and like as a punishment, I'm like, and they'd say, "Don't use, you know, you can't look at your television." Okay, but I have all my books and comics. You know, like I'll just sit and read. You know, or I listen to the radio or whatever.
Right. And I think that's one of the seeing that, like I said, that growth and independence, where they're learning and they're incorporating, and my oldest is at college. He goes to college in town, so I still see him, but not very often, right? So he gets up early in the morning and is up there first thing, and he's doing his studies, and then he'll come back home late at night, and, you know, secret himself away in his room and work on his homework, and so I don't see him like I'm used to, but he's just taking care of himself, taking care of business, doing his papers, you know. So, you know, I can't even. He's making the most out of that scholarship. So
yeah. No, I mean, it's weird because, like, on the one hand, you know, when they're completely dependent on you, which she obviously is, it's so hard. Some days, so hard. But my sense is that at some point you end up missing it a little bit.
Oh yeah, you do, and it's not consistently, like for me as a dad anyway. I don't consistently miss my kids being, you know, snuggleable.
No.
But every once and again, I'm just like, remember they just fit right in my forearm, and I could just coochie coo their face for hours. And now if I tried that, he'd smack me, and he'd be right to, you know.
Indeed.
But so, of course, I wanted you. I first, well, I got the idea to bring you on.
Yeah.
I've had you on before talking about movie men and everything.
Yeah.
And I saw that Doug was sharing some art from the second project coming up.
Yeah.
That was pretty exciting. But also, you've written a lot of other stuff. And the title that I found most interesting, you wrote a book called In Defense of Hypocrisy.
Yeah, I did that. I was 26, I think, when I wrote it.
Tell me about this, because I'm fascinated by the title.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you the story behind it is, I don't know if it's interesting. It might be. I'd been working for doing some book editing for Thomas Nelson, and my editor there said you should write books for us, and I said, okay. Well, what do you want me to write? And he said, why don't you come up with a list of things that you can write? And I think I wrote 10 things down, and I put In Defense of Hypocrisy in the middle of the list, thinking it was just filler. Like it's not that I wouldn't write it, but they're not going to want me to write that. And all of the things I thought would be the surefire, oh yeah, let's do that. No, not interested. In Defense of Hypocrisy was the thing that they wanted. And so I said, okay, sure, I can write that book for you. And
it's a fascinating title.
Yeah. It came at a time in my life when I had a job that I really didn't like, but I couldn't quit just yet. And it allowed me to take a unpaid leave and just go back from Washington, D.C. to Washington State. And for several months, I just sat in a bar for around midday and tried to hit my word count. And I'd go in and I'd have lunch. I'd go in a little after the lunch rush and, have a beer and another beer and maybe another, who knows, it scaled up. But there was a reason I was doing that, because I was having a hard time getting my brain to just focus on doing this and not freak out, because, it's a book. I'm writing a book. Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually had to make my brain dumb enough that it could just, focus on the book. Right.
Great.
And so I know I did decent writing. I up to about 3 beers.
Right.
I did decent writing. What I found though was that I was a horrible speller when I was happy. So I'd have to always go in and fix the spelling after the fact.
Oh, that's what editors are for.
Yeah.
So this
anyway,
was
good.
I'm sorry. So this was the first book, right?
Yeah, In Defense of Hypocrisy. First book.
And what was the premise of it?
The premise is that hypocrisy isn't as bad as you think it is. It's badly misunderstood, and that we often attack hypocrisy when we should attack very different things. Also, that it begins with the example of Bill Bennett and how he got nabbed, or he got there was a big story about him, how he lost a bunch of money gambling.
Okay.
And people played the whole gotcha, yo, you're a big moralizer and you lose money, you're gambling. And he's like, I never said gambling was bad. Ever. I said too much gambling is bad. You shouldn't do what you can't afford, but I'm a rich man and I can afford it, right? And it made sense. It was completely consistent. There was nothing inconsistent about. I don't like Bill Bennett, by the way, but anyways, there was nothing inconsistent about what he was saying.
Right.
There was no contradiction. Even there wasn't. It's not even that there wasn't hypocrisy. There wasn't even contradiction that people often confuse for hypocrisy.
Exactly.
And I said, this is completely absurd. What? No one is flagging that this isn't even the half thing of the full thing that you're. What? Anyways, so that's how the book begins. And it just sort of looks at hypocrisy in lots of different realms of life. It's not always there's different kinds of hypocrites, by the way. That's one of the things that, and I regret the heck out of not knowing this. I got this distinction in the book, but I didn't use the term because I didn't have it.
Okay.
There, someone who is a hypocrite, typically, the what we think of as hypocrite is someone pretends to be better than they are.
Right.
Right. And there's another kind of hypocrisy, and it's where you pretend to be worse than you are, and that's sometimes called hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm.
And there are various reasons for why. A lot of times you find yourself in a morally compromised situation, and the only way that you can actually work towards a better result is to pretend to be going along with the system, basically, while you're still working to get a better outcome out of it.
Yeah. I think you look at board meetings. You look at like small town politics.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big factor. I don't know if you're familiar with Scott Ott, the political pundit and writer.
Okay. He used to do. Well, he still. I don't know if he still does, but he does like short parody. News
Yeah. He doesn't do the parody so much anymore because he had to get a different job, and so.
Okay.
But he still does. He just still does some commentary. He was part of the Bill Whittle group.
Okay.
But with that, he talks about, for a while he was a city councilman or a county commissioner or something back in Pennsylvania for a spell, and he talks about his time there and how people just sort of expected folks to go along to get along, and he's just like, we could be doing a lot better with not spending everybody's money stupidly if we just paid attention to how we did things. But in order to get people to pay attention to how they did things, sometimes he felt that he was being asked to vote on things that weren't helpful in order to get people to even listen to helpful suggestions. And I think that it's that kind of thing you're talking about, where he's like, okay, I'll agree to your stupid idea if you just listen to me.
Yeah. Another realm where hypocrisy is, the actual hypocrisy, on a small scale, is helpful and good, is in parenting. And it's because I argue that hypocrisy is actually this like weird moral engine, that they say it's the price that vice pays to virtue, right? I mean, that's it actually can be paid the other way. Virtue can pay the vice, but you're the way you are, whatever that is, when you have your kids, and a lot of times then you really have to try very hard to change yourself. And it's not always going to be completely effective, but you're trying to present a better example for your child, and you're expecting this child, to the greatest extent possible, to live up to the example of you, and not the you before you tried to start being this better person.
I think sometimes that gets labeled a lot of hypocrisy, like it's no kids that parents are like, okay, now listen, drugs, drinking, sex, dangerous stuff, maybe try to avoid it. But you were a drunken whore in high school.
Yeah, how do you think I had you?
Just because I did it doesn't mean it's a good idea.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessarily a hypocrisy, unless it's a situation like in Back to the Future 2, right? Or Back to the Future, right? Where I can't remember mom's name, but she just totally like, I never did this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That's not true. Yeah. It's a different being able to say, no, I'm living from bad example. I mean, I've done things that are stupid. I've done things that are dangerous.
Yeah.
Maybe listen, and this is one thing I've talked, to my kids openly about. I say, I wasn't a bad kid in high school, but I occasionally do reckless things in the garage. I'm like, okay, you're going to use a bench grinder. Make sure you have eye protection. Dad, you're not wearing eye protection. And I'm like, look, it's my eye, okay? I don't want your eye getting hurt. Yeah. So, is that hypocrisy? Maybe. But I think there's also a value judgment in there, a different sorts of value.
True. But to a certain extent, it's It's unavoidable. I mean, like the parenting is about modeling, and modeling involves acting, and acting is where hypocrisy comes from. Like that's the term hypocrite. It came from that was a person that was there was the Greek chorus, and the guy that would come out from the Greek chorus to speak was the hypocrite, the actor.
Mm.
Yep. And when Jesus was railing against hypocrites in the New Testament, right? He's actually saying, "You actors."
Mm.
He's basically saying, if you look at how Jesus' take on hypocrisy is very different than the modern sort of anti-hypocritical take. He isn't saying that he talks about how these people have authority that should be respected, even though he personally didn't respect it. And what he was saying is that not that the thing they're saying is bad and that or illegitimate or anything like that. He's what he's trying to do is to call them into compliance with their standard.
Right.
Rather than trying to undermine the standard, which is that's the typical thing that people do when they use hypocrisy allegations. They're trying to undermine standards pretty much entirely.
Yeah, they have the whole two quote fallacy. The what about you, right?
Yeah.
Just like, hey, look, I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I'm simply saying that perfection looks like this.
Yeah.
I also want to reach this goal, or I agree to acknowledge the benefit of this goal. I'm not saying I'm there. That's my destination.
Yeah, I mean, there's the famous line, which is about can a bad man set a good example or make good arguments that are taken seriously by people and be a force for good, right? And the line is the sign that points to Boston, it doesn't have to go there.
I like that.
Yeah. It's like, no, the idea, the example, the model, whatever you want to call it, that's the thing that's important. Yes, I should be living up to that, but that's a distraction from whether or not what I'm saying is germane, right? Like, I may be wrong. I mean, maybe you shouldn't go to Boston. Maybe Boston is a horrible place that no one should ever visit. Okay, but I'm just to give you.
I think if you look at, I cannot remember the character's name, but in A Tale for Two Cities, right? There's the two lawyers, and they look just about alike. Yeah. And one's the drunkard, and he's just a horrible wretch of a person, but he's deeply in love with the female protagonist.
Yeah.
There's his partner, who is everything a guy ought to be.
Yeah.
And is also deeply in love with the female protagonist, and she ends up marrying. I can't remember their names for whatever reason. She married Straight Arrow, and the crooked fellow is the hero of the story. Just try not to spoil it, because everybody out there read.
Well, spoiler. We could just say spoiler, right? Right.
Yeah. Spoiler alert. Go read Great Expectations.
He ends up sacrificing himself. To save. And actually, if you look at that, I mean, he basically dies something like a martyr's death.
Absolutely, but even his life is one that points to the good. He said, "This I will not attain the good, but this is the good." I'm broken. I am a wretch. I am a corrupt person. But look at the good, and the good is over there. And actually, Jack Kerouac, the beat poet, said something very similar. Somebody asked him, he said, You say you're a conservative guy, but you've done all of these horrible things. And he said, I did them so you don't have to. He said, my life is not an example. My life is a warning.
Yeah, there you go.
It's like, that's a weird thing to say, Jack, but okay.
No, but it's true. I mean, like model, it's like, and I'm getting this a little bit more as I'm now a parent. Like, modeling is just really way more important than you can say that beforehand, but then if you actually see it day in and day out, you see how you feel, you live how important it is,
Yeah.
So I honestly think the book probably should have, if I was to, it should have been called On Hypocrisy, because it was a kind of just a look at it is a defense of hypocrisy, or at least trying to jog us and to get us to think like, no, this narrative you have in your head about how if this guy does something that you think is contradictory, A, it may not be contradictory. B, that doesn't mean it's hypocrisy. C, even if it is hypocrisy, that really isn't adding a whole lot. And like that's one of the messages of the book.
And I think that's actually an important time to think. I mean, point to think about it. 'Cause I know a lot of people will just try to point out, moral failings as though it detracts from the standards a person holds to, or wants to hold to, or shoots for.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Bring it up. Let's see it.
So in the chat, Twitless says reported the stream.
Too soon.
And then he also said, next you're going to tell me Oliver doesn't get more.
Lisa.
Yes. He does, but not right away. So
I actually might write a column based on this. Hey man, how's it going?
Yeah, Neil Star also says hello, and I just love the Aquabats avatar. I've told him that a couple times, but that just makes me happy inside. But no, I think it's when it comes to the concept of morality, and one of the things we talked about in the last segment, I'm talking about Star Wars, is one of the reasons that Dan and I both feel it's been so broadly applicable and been so popular is because it plays toward these universal cross-cultural themes of right and wrong, of fatherhood and of independence, of growing up, of redemption, and virtually every society on Earth holds those things as important things.
Yep.
And, some more than others, and I know the Western Judeo-Christian tradition holds redemption to be a huge thing. Other societies don't believe it's as important, but in mythologies and fairy tales and legends, those elements crop up again and again.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that it's not. It's about the percentage or something that we place on redemption. It's not that other cultures don't value it as well. They just don't value it as highly.
They just may not value it as highly. Yeah, I think that's a good way to explain it. But one of the things with that we have is, I think, this concept and some of the stuff in that little segment about hypocrisy, the idea that it's important to think about in relationship to discussions about truth and discussions about standards, discussions about how we relate to society with our difference of opinions, because are those standards outside of ourselves, or are they something that we create within ourselves? Mm-hmm. So if there's something we create within ourselves, then there is no hypocrisy, right? Because it's our standards are whatever we say they are.
Yeah.
But we believe that hypocrisy is a thing, so it would imply that the standard comes from outside of ourselves, and it's just whether we're applying it honestly, truthfully, understanding it well. Are we plumbing the depths of what those standards might be? Are we relating back to our experience and all that kind of stuff? And I think that's when I saw you had a book called "In Defense of Hypocrisy." I was like,
Did you get a copy yet?
I have not. I have.
Okay.
Not.
It's real cheap if you want to get one on Amazon. They're not expensive, and people who have read it tell me it's a highly readable book. Before I wrote that book, I read most of what I'd written to that point, and I hated it so much. I just said this writing is convoluted, it's self-important, awful. I cannot believe anyone published this dreck. Now, I was being a little bit too hard on myself, but so I rethought how I wrote. And when you actually read through that book, I'm rewriting how I write as I write it. And it very much affected the way I do prose. And I think that's really important going forward. I very much prize directness, when it's possible, simplicity. I do have fun though with wordplay. That's a thing that you see that's pretty consistent throughout all my writing.
Yeah.
Over time.
Well, cool.
But,
Cool.
yeah.
So I will have to check that out.
Cool.
And then maybe we'll have to have a repeat discussion, later on.
Well, because the interesting thing is that I actually at the last chapter, the reason I asked is because the last chapter begins by saying, if you've read this book and you think I'm wrong, then there really isn't any conclusion you can reach. Then I am a bad person. Anyway, so you may enjoy this. Like, I just put it all out there. Like, yes, this man could be a villain.
Oh, that's actually really funny. I just I got into a discussion about somebody sounding like a villain yesterday, and I was trying to make a joke about it, and they decided I was trying to mock them personally, not just their word choice.
Yeah.
They got offended about it, but that's okay. That's a whole different thing.
It was in Shakespeare. It's like there was an insult about a guy to smile and be a villain,
Oh, where is that? I think. Oh, I can't remember.
Yeah.
You're in ponder, but I'm not going to right now.
So much of Shakespeare, it just overflows, but you can trace it back to the source. But
yeah, then it can take a while. Yeah, it can take a while. So we've got about 10 minutes before my time is up, but I did want to talk about some of your other stuff because one of the books that you've written that I'm very interested in the motivations behind were the I think it was the Bucket Carriers. Is that what it was called? About the vice presidents.
It's called the Warm Bucket Brigade. It's a story of the American vice presidency. And what I argue, go ahead.
What spurred that on? Because that's a really interesting topic that hasn't. I don't think I've heard anybody else touch on that. But
the John Nance Garner said that the vice president he was Franklin Roosevelt had 3 vice presidents, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was his first vice president. And people asked him, what do you think of the vice presidency? And he said, it's not worth a warm bucket of spit or piss. It's the stories differ on that one.
Okay, right.
So that has been the thing. Like, oh yeah, the vice presidency is worthless, blah blah blah. But if you actually look at how many vice presidents go on to become presidents, like 13 or 14, it's a crazy number. It's like a third of our presidents were vice president at some point, right? And then even if they don't go on to be president, they still a lot of times have a very large effect on our national politics.
They're the president of the Senate.
Well, no, that too. But I mean, what I'm saying is that they get the nomination, or give you an example of how the vice presidency can actually be a weird stepping stone. In 1956, Stevenson gets to convention, and instead of announcing his choice of vice president, he tells the convention, "You guys get to pick," right? And then JFK features way higher than people expected in people's rankings, and that actually helped to springboard his presidential, run.
Mm-hmm.
The vice presidents, you don't see them coming. They frequently end up dominating national politics or in weird ways. Like Richard Nixon, he's on the ticket in 1952, 56, 60, 68, and 72. Right? I mean,
yeah.
Just to give you an idea. So he's on 5 different presidential tickets, because he was initially the vice president. And just so many of we think of the vice president as sort of a comic figure, and sometimes they are. I'm not saying that, like, Joe Biden was kind of funny. But look, Joe Biden may end up getting the Democratic nomination. Joe Biden, who knows, could be president. I don't think so, but it just gives you an idea of how how much the vice presidency has sort of determined our politics. And it's like this weird office that was almost like an afterthought. And honestly, if you look at the Federalist Papers when they're arguing for the vice presidency, if you read between the lines, it's like, well, we didn't think that went through that well, but we don't want to, throw away the whole Constitution over the vice president, so we got to defend it. Like I even in the Washington Post, I actually argued that we should. This was many years ago, that we should just abolish the vice presidency. But I've thought of, and like that's one thing we could do that. I'm not against it, but I actually think I also think there's this problem in the executive where that we ask the president to be too much because we fuse head of state and head of government, and that was not a good idea.
Yeah, I think the biggest part about that is I don't necessarily think that it's that's because it wasn't. I won't say it wasn't originally planned, but the powers of the executive branch have they've been so multiplied in the 20th century that it's totally out of the line. I mean, most of the stuff the administration does should be handled by the Congress and then handed down to the states to deal with. And I mean that's the Department of Energy. Good God.
Yeah, just unplug it. No, but dad joke.
The Department of Education. All that stuff should be. I mean, that should
fail.
Yeah.
I said that in sort of a Trumpian way. And I didn't even mean to.
Well, it's okay. It is, but it is though. I mean, that was one of the things. Like when I grew up and I was getting into politics and studying government and civics and all that kind of stuff, and I realized that Reagan, one of the things that he promised that he was going to do back in '80 was to abolish the brand new Department of Education, because it was Carter had it pushed through Congress and it was a stupid idea then, and he's like, we're just going to get rid of this later though. We're going to take care of Russia first. And
well, I mean, makes sense.
Well, I mean, yeah, but it didn't. Those aren't mutually exclusive goals, Jeremy.
I'm just saying, if you got to pick one of the two.
Yeah, but I don't think
I'm just saying, if you have to, if you gun to your head, Matthew, which one do you pick?
Yeah, well, once again, I don't think you needed to pick one of these.
No, I'm sorry. There is one bullet headed at you if you don't make this decision. You can choose one or the other, but you got to choose.
Yeah, I don't see the Department of Education being necessary for the general defense. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Anyway, but that's we're getting deep into the weeds. Okay. I think we've had a few people off the chat, but that's okay.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah. Oh man, no, it's okay. That's not everyone's guilty, but no, I think that's
Let me go even deeper though, because I actually I'm going to write a piece. It's a not too distant point about how I actually think we could use the vice presidency to fix so many problems of this, having the president being the head of government and head of state.
Mm.
Gun to my head, I would shoot the Department of Education twice. I've known some people who work there, and they don't necessarily disagree with you.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I think what they ought to do is actually have it so that the president and vice president are elected separately, as they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of. I mean, the president controls the Department of State and the Department of Defense, possibly the Department of Homeland Security. That's negotiable. That's it. That's all he does.
Just get rid of Homeland Security. I mean,
sure. I'm just fine. But if we need some kind of an interior terrorist defense / way of repelling invaders, I don't know.
The NSA can't do that.
They could eavesdrop on the invaders. So we have all kinds of dirt on you. You better go home. But I think that the president should be tasked with like the Department of Defense and the Department of State, maybe the Department of Homeland Security if you don't abolish it, maybe. And the vice president should be in charge of everything else. That's my thinking at this moment in time.
Well, I do like the separation of powers, and separating them more seems reasonable to a certain extent. So that's that is kind of how Bush and Cheney had it going, though, from what I understand.
It's complicated.
Yeah, that's the rumor anyway.
No, I think that the basically the president should be head of state, but the state obviously should be included the war making power.
Yeah. The part of America that deals with the world.
Yeah, exactly. And the vice president should be head of government. I think that would be a perfectly decent way to slice it up. It would also make it so that we elect different sorts of people. Like you'd elect a person for president that you wanted to represent your country well in the world, right? And you'd elect someone for vice president who you wanted to be a brawler and get things done at the in government the way you wanted. And you wouldn't necessarily have to like the guy.
Yeah. Well, in that case, we would kind of have the opposite ticket we have today, I would suppose.
Probably, yeah. No, yeah, Trump under my system, Trump would make much better vice presidential material than president.
Yeah, definitely little boss Tweety action going there, if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah. I mean, like he's just like I will punch you in the nose.
Yeah, of course. Tweety's a whole different thing. Maybe that's not a fair comparison after all.
Who knows? Hard to say.
Yeah, it's. I could get into that, but oh look, the hour's gone.
Funny how that works.
No, it's just time flows on, man. Time flows on.
Yeah, I know.
Before we cut out entirely,
yeah,
couple questions here about comic projects. We've talked a little bit about your non-comic writing, and I think you've got you've been writing like for quite a while about a lot of topics. So
yeah,
I think that's really interesting.
I've had thousands of articles published in at least hundreds of publications. I've honestly lost track.
Yeah, because you've done philosophy, religion, politics, history, all kinds of stuff.
I've written about dermatology. I've written about contact lenses. I've written about. There are very few topics that I wouldn't entertain writing about.
Jeremy, what is there to write about contact lenses? I wanted to go over to talk about this. I have to know.
What? Oh, I did a piece for Reason magazine, and it was about, if I remember rightly, this would have been in like 2002, by the way, about how they were basically the optometrists were trying to make it so that you couldn't get cheap lenses because they would grind their lenses and whatnot and like special for people's eyes rather than like mass manufacturing them. And it in many cases, look, I'm not saying that's never a thing you need, but most people, no, they just need contacts you can put in and they stay for a day or two or 5 or whatever, however long they're supposed to last. And then out they go. And it actually made a lot more sense to just have mass manufactured contacts. And it's good that the optometrist. Yeah. It's really good that the optometrist basically lost on that one.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, a lot of it has to do with, like hard contact lenses. My aunt used to have those, and they did have to be custom fit. But technology for the microfiber mesh that they made the soft contacts out of just didn't exist. So,
and you had technology coming in and challenging it, and you had the existing industry trying to push it out. And anyways, so that was what I did there. Yeah,
that's crazy. And for those of you who might care, I don't know if you guys know this. The way they make them now is like I said, it's a microfiber mesh, and the liquid in the lens actually gives it its shape and the light bending ability. It's fascinating. It's like a matrix.
That's cool.
It's actually a lot like the way skin tissue is built, where there's the matrix of structure, and then that structure is filled in with fluid, and that fluid does the work. So it's fascinating how those disposable contact lenses are put together. So
yeah.
Dio says he's more curious about the dermatology.
Yeah, that I don't know. I did a piece on this was just a, I was writing this for a dermatologist website on alternatives to Botox.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Turns out there are some that are just strikingly similar but cost a little bit less money.
Well, and there's just getting old. I mean, that's my favorite alternative to Botox.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
old. We were talking about, because we were talking about Star Wars and coming out when we were all children or whatever, and now I'll be 40 in the spring, so I'm well on my way to being old, and I'm just pretty okay with that.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's different for men and women because men tend to age better, at least to a certain point.
I think that's true. I think there's also people have different concepts of expectations about age too.
That's true. Yeah.
Like I know it's because my wife and I have been together for almost 20 years. Well, we've actually been a couple for more than 20, but we got married about a year and a half after we met. So we've been married 19 years, and neither of us are at our peak anymore. We're both rounding the curve, so to speak, and I'm perfectly fine with that because we've had 20 years of life together. So I look at our wear down, and we sometimes creak getting up in the morning and all that kind of stuff, and that's 20 years of life that sometimes it hurts, but it's worth going through for me. And
that's beautiful.
My wife thinks I'm sappy and tells me to shut up a lot. So
okay, well, there is that, but it's also beautiful.
She's a firecracker. I love that woman.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So
Cool.
Okay. Well, we're at the 2 hours. Before we go, Jeremy, what can we look at for comics in 2020?
You're gonna get a sequel to Movie Men, and there's a lot of other stuff. You'll see Murder that'll come out. You'll see Tarot. I hope you see Beer Man. You probably will. I don't know, things of that nature.
Man, you are going to be putting out product. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, pumping it out.
Are you planning on doing crowdfunds for all of them, or are you just going to put them up in the store, or what's the plan for that?
It's just going to depend. I want to crowdfund some of it. I definitely am going to crowdfund Movie Men 2. I probably will crowdfund Tarot. Murder Up in the Air, just because it's not an all ages book the way those other two are, and I'm trying to kind of, I don't know, I'm working on what do you do in terms of should I just put out all ages stuff, or if I put out other stuff, how do I differentiate that?
Yeah.
So, and it's not like Murder is just it's a horror. It's a horror story. It's light, but it's horror, and so I wouldn't call that all ages.
Makes sense.
And then I'll get into doing some crime stuff at some point, and that's definitely going to be more mature because of how crime is. That's just how it is.
That's how it is. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, excellent. I know I really enjoyed Movie Men, but I need more. So yeah. I need to hear that's going out.
Yeah, it's Doug's working on it. He's given me a complete outline of what it looks like. I am very excited about what I see him producing. I think it's gonna and we're gonna offer obviously reprints of number 1, number 2, but we're also gonna offer a combined thing where we do a combined edition of the 2. The people can order that, it's so, like, in a weird way, I wrote my first graphic novel. So yay. So
cool, excellent. Well, do you guys have any kind of web presence for Movie Men? I was looking for it, but I couldn't find anything.
Just follow me on Twitter, and I'll let people know when it's I'm at Jeremy Lott Diary, and we should build out more of a web presence. So that'll have to be a project for next year.
So, and you guys are through Wicked. Are you guys gonna be up, right? Correct?
Yeah. We're going to be actually at the store? Sorry, say again.
So are you guys going to be up on their store coming up here?
We'll be, the Movie Men 1 will be up on their store. And the idea is that they have is that all the stuff will be on the store eventually, but it's you got to fulfill the crowdfunding, and all that promises are made to people. You got to keep those promises before you make it available widely. There's also they're going to be I think in March. That's the Emerald City Comic Con, and Wicked is going to have a table there, and I will be tabling with them. Cool. So that'll be my first convention as a creator.
Sweet.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that.
I have only done conventions as a creator. I never went to them as a fan. So that's
I've done obviously I've gone to them as a fan, but I also I have a lot of comics and you got to get rid of them sometimes. So I've gone to shows as a dealer. So I've done that.
Yep. I can imagine that. So well, that all sounds awesome. I will let you know also if you happen to want to travel next October, we host a mini convention here in Scottsbluff. And give free spots to people. Because we have it in conjunction with our local mall, and they don't charge us rent, so we don't have to charge others rent. So if you, it's small, it's a little thing, but if you happen to want to travel,
I'll consider it.
it might. I don't know.
I think it'd be fun if you could. You could line this up, especially if you could do Artist Alley stuff to go around the country and just spend a year just doing comic shows.
Oh yeah, actually, my friend Dan, who was on last week, he does that a lot.
Okay,
so he is the colorist for Nightmare Before Christmas, Zero's Journey from Tokyo Pop.
Okay,
and so that that's what he does. He colors Zero's Journey and goes to cons and does commission work and that kind of stuff. And that's his job pretty much. So
yeah, no, that I think it'd be like I don't think I could pull it off with a family now, but it would be fun to just like have some sort of a trailer or whatever and just go con to con to con to con to con.
Yep.
So, anyways,
cool, man. Cool.
Thanks for having me on, and
of course, absolutely. Absolutely, and guys, check out in the description. We've got links to his Amazon, to Jeremy's Amazon store. We've got links to the Mythoverse and to their Patreon, and the Ideal Comics Patreon in case you want to support the things that I do. Tomorrow, we are going to be having a new Forces story up on forcesofgoodandevil.net called. Well, it's not new. It's a story from a while back, but it's been new. We're newly publishing it on our new website. And it's called Into the Wild Blue Internet. It's a Spring Break 2005 story featuring Game Boy, the Peter Pan of the Internet. And it's a fun little story, I think, anyway. And we've got a new cover that's going to be going up with that. So I'm hoping to have that up before dawn. So we'll see if I pull it off or not. So got to color the new cover, but it's going to be great. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Next week is Christmas, so Merry Christmas to everybody. And I can't announce next week's guests because they haven't said yes yet. So we'll see if I get it together or not.
It's Santa.
Hey, I just got back from my trip. How's it going? That's my worst Santa ever. So, that's it, man. Thanks to Jeremy. Thanks to Dan, who's left. Thanks to all you guys in the chat. And have a great Christmas, everybody.